We need to change the way we think about water.
As our population grows, water is becoming more scarce. But we have this massive resource of rainfall to use for that watering.
In most Australian cities, the amount of stormwater is about equivalent to our total water demand for that city. So it's like we're giving away gold.
Only around 3% of all stormwater is reused in Australia.
We need to start thinking about stormwater as a resource rather than a problem.
In a natural environment, typically around 80% of the rain that falls actually just gets evaporated back up into the atmosphere, transpired through trees, etc. In an urban area, about 90% of that rainfall becomes runoff going straight into our streams. So there's this massive excess, something like 5 times the natural amount of runoff is now going into our streams and cities.
And this degrades creeks and rivers and can cause flash flooding in cities. We can create win-win scenarios where we can create beautiful spaces and reduce our use of potable water.
Something like this green roof behind me really acts like a sponge, just like the natural landscape. When rain falls, it's absorbed into the substrate here with the soil, and then plants can transpire that and use that to grow. So it's really mimicking that natural landscape in a very cleverly engineered way.
Green roofs are vegetation on structures, and that can be buildings, it can be car parks, it can be railway stations. And viewing green roofs, even for 40 seconds, can improve workplace productivity. They also cool buildings.
What you see here is a rain garden. So every time it rains, all runoff from all these concrete surfaces, but also roofs from these buildings, goes into this rain garden, which, as you can see, looks really beautiful and attracts birds and bees. When rain comes, all this dirt from roads gets washed into our beautiful beaches. So if you have something like this, it acts as a barrier, as a filter. So you capture that water, filter that water, and then you release that water. And in this case, it just goes cleaned into our pipe there, but it could be captured and used, and it can be used for toilet flushing in these buildings or irrigation of parks. There was a study done in pretty wealthy part of Sydney where they found if your house, family house, is 50 meters from a rain garden like this, that it can fetch 6% more. So when you put all these things together, I think it's no-brainer that we should try to incorporate these systems in our urban fabric.
I'm Chris Walsh. By putting in a rainwater tank and our rain gardens, we're saving our local river from the impacts of urban stormwater runoff. We're saving ourselves water from the main supply. We're creating some really nice shade that keeps our house cool, and we're reducing the risk of local flooding in the neighbourhood. The rainwater tank and the rain gardens together use about 150 litres a day. That's more than about a third of the water that we use that comes in our water bill. So I guess we've reduced our water consumption by a third. The design is pretty simple. It's basically the whole roof going to the rainwater tank and then overflowing to the back rain garden. And the biggest challenge was making sure we had the levels right. So the back rain garden has to overflow at a level that's just a bit higher than the front rain garden. In about 95% of rain events, we have no runoff from the property at all.
You can save 25% of money you spent to basically fix problems after flooding just by having rain tanks.
If all houses across a city like Melbourne had a system in place where they were not overflowing to the street very often, we'd certainly decrease our flooding risks. We'd also start working towards having much healthier rivers and creeks in our rivers, and we'd be using a lot less water from our reservoirs and increasing our water supply security.
We are already experiencing issues with volume of water. At the same time, population growth is pretty rapid. Sydney had 4 million around 2000, and then in 2016 it reached 5 million, so it's a huge population increase.
Dams are now down to 46% and dropping every week.
Last week, demand outstripped supply by up to 6 million litres a day.
We have decided to be prudent to introduce water restrictions.
Those found breaching restrictions face fines of around $200.
You can significantly reduce the amount of water restrictions by harvesting rainwater and stormwater.
With the use of 3 different water sources, rainwater, recycled and drinking water, up to 70% less drinking water will be used.
So the 42 hectares of this development, every home, all 460, will have all 3 of those sources of waters. This is groundbreaking in a water efficiency sense. Every hot water, apart from the hot water you need for kitchen, is provided from this rainwater system. The tank screens and filters rainwater, so it can be used for showers, baths and the washing machine. The smart tank is also sent weather information, so it can release water before storms arrive to reduce runoff and therefore reduce nuisance flooding. We need to make our homes more resilient to, water scarcity, and to, obviously with population growth, we need to be able to provide our homes with good quality water in a more sustainable way.
Western Sydney is one of the fastest growing parts of Australia. In that area to the west of Parramatta, they're forecast to have an extra 1 million people living in that area over the next 20 years. Sydney's dams are already around 50% full at the moment. We're looking into potentially a period of quite prolonged drought. So how do you add all these people into this catchment, minimise the impacts on the waterways and on the dams, but also in an area that's notorious for getting really hot? So we're trying to change people's thinking about urban development as just lots of roofs and car parks and roads. We're trying to make sure that there's a lot of greenery and green space. The evidence is really strong that we can cool urban environments by a significant amount, sometimes up to 10 degrees, by having really good, healthy street trees. Because we need to think about transport, parks, waterways, architecture. There's so many different facets that need to come together to change the way we do urban development. I think the really important thing is we have these great case study projects that people can look at and say, oh, you're right, we can do things differently.
We've got two kind of ironic challenges, I suppose. We're going to have longer periods of droughts, and so we need to find alternate water supplies to boost our current supply. But we're also going to have much more intense rainfall, meaning that our flood risk is increased. The idea of capturing stormwater to use it can tackle both.